Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to our first off the cuff presentation from the Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship in Carbondale, Illinois, generally known as CUF, C-U-F. CUF is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and our program this evening is coming to you from the sanctuary of the fellowship on Parish Lane in Carbondale. I'm Gene Basanta. I'm the member of CUF and the host for tonight's program with Dr. Charles Ruffner, a member of the forestry faculty in the College of Agriculture, Life, and Physical Sciences at Carbondale, Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. Charles is in, as I said, is in the forestry, member of the forestry faculty, teaching his research and teaching is in the areas of forestry and fire history. There'll be an opportunity for questions and discussion. We anticipate a program will talk for about half an hour or so, and then open it up to questions. We'll be mindful of the time, and we're thinking 45, maybe 50 minutes. If you're on Zoom, and I know we have some people on Zoom, feel free during the presentation to put your questions into chat, and we'll get to those hopefully at the end. This is a chance for, and it's designed to be really an informal and relaxed conversation. A little fireside chat, exactly. And so rather than reading Charles' biography or reciting from his CV, why don't we just get started and begin with asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself. About your background and what brought you into forestry and ecology.
Well, I guess it all started growing up in central Pennsylvania, in the foothills of the Appalachians, and growing up with creeks in our yard and woods to play in. My dad set the woods on fire when I was like 9 years old, and I think that had a very positive influence on me. He was trying to enlarge his garden, and I call that my first prescribed fire. So he was kind of a closet geographer and geologist, and taught us about rock strata and rock cuts on the roadways and stuff. So I just grew up kind of always playing in the woods, whittling, and liked trees, and had trees on our property. So I didn't really think about forestry at all until I was in the Army, actually. Family of 6, not a lot of money for college, so I joined the Army and used the GI Bill to go to college. And I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and they were setting the woods on fire there for a little woodpecker known as the red-cockaded woodpecker, a rare endangered species down in the South. So I kind of asked these guys in the Corps of Engineers, Bureau of Forestry, what are you guys doing? And oh, we're burning for this little bird. It's pretty cool. So I got interested in that, and then there was a little forestry school set in the mountains of Pennsylvania, Penn State, Monalta, as they say. And Jody and I got out of the Army and went to school there, loved it, and then got talked into going up to the main campus at State College, and kind of mentored with a great forest ecologist, Mark Abrams, there, that just got me into tree rings and fire history and old witness tree records from the General Land Office, and reading those old surveyor documents, and that just kind of interested me a lot. Okay. It just interested me a lot in the outdoors and trying to explain our natural world, really. So that's a bit of my education, I guess. Graduated from Penn State in '99 with my PhD, and did a year at University of Massachusetts with a great fire ecologist named Bill Patterson, and he's my Prometheus. He put the torch in my hand, I have to say. So yeah, and that got me here to SIU in 1999.
Yeah, so talk about coming to SIU. What brought you brought you to SIU.
I had
and
no idea about Little Egypt or Salukis or anything like that. And a buddy of mine from Penn State was big into baseball, and he goes, "Oh man, you're going to the land of the Salukis," you know? I'm like, "What's that?" So he knew about the baseball team because they were big back in the day. And so Gene, friends with Jody and I's, I can't even remember his name, he told us that. But anyway, I was at University of Massachusetts, and my ex-boss here, Jim Zajac, still in the department, he had come here a few years before. He and I were grad students at Penn State, and he had come here a few years before and said, "Hey, we got this great job for a surveyor or a forest measurements person. You should apply." So I did. In spring break of '99, we were here after the big snowstorm, and I'm sure some people remember that. And I've been here ever since. So that's the Saluki connection, quite honestly.
So talk a little bit about what you do here in terms of your teaching, research, service. What sort of things?
I got hired to teach forest measurements, which I still do. I still love that, you know, teach students how to go measure trees and measure land and things of that nature. And my research is bounced all around between fire history, fire ecology.
What do you mean by fire history? What is that?
Fire history is looking at the chronology of fires on the landscape. And generally we do that through looking at scars on on trees that are scarred by fire. So putting together the chronology of those years through time here in the Shawnee and in other places in Pennsylvania and the Mid-Atlantic. So I got into fire history. I've taught a lot of students about fire management. I think that's one of the big things that we do at SIU and forestry is try to teach students about, you know, experiences, getting out in the woods, doing things, building those kind of skills and foundations is what I think I do the best at SIU forestry.
How about service work? I know that you do a lot of service work here.
Well, yeah, service, I mean, we're not one of the big land grant universities with service, but we do a fair amount of outreach with landowners and with different agencies that work in the forest that train students or that want to hire our trained students, like IDNR or the Southern Illinois Prescribed Burn Association. So yeah, our students get a lot of exposure to landowners and land management agencies. This past weekend, we were at Touch of Nature doing a big forest cleanup. We had 47 volunteers from campus coming out and doing invasive species removal and that sort of fun stuff.
I know you've been involved in a lot of international activities as well around the world, including in Afghanistan. I think people would like to hear a little bit about that.
Well, through the years, I mean, I never knew that you could do this as a college graduate. I never knew that you could use like your agriculture degree to go overseas and help people out. You know, I wish they'd have told me that earlier. But in 2005, 2006, our university SIU has always been involved internationally in lots of different ways, and they have been involved in Afghanistan. And in 2006 to 2008, we were applying for different grants through the U.S. Agency for International Development. And we landed a nice big grant to do water technology transfer in Afghanistan from 2008 to 2011 or so. And several colleagues and I spent much of our summers there working with different military units, different agricultural development teams, provincial reconstruction teams, and I've talked about it here before, trying to kind of make Afghan farmers a little bit better farmers. So planting trees, working on water delivery projects, things of that nature. And then also outside of there, we've tried to dabble in like North Africa and Morocco, doing the same sort of thing across Africa. And a great trip I had was to the Dominican Republic for USAID. They run a farmer-to-farmer program where they bring Western farm, agricultural experts, and they bring them to Central America And so I got to work with a couple different farmer association groups in Dominican Republic. That was a wonderful trip too. So very enriching. And like I said, I really enjoyed the international work, and I try to tell my students that there are so many opportunities to work in the Foreign Ag Service and work for the government overseas, because there's so many countries that really need a lot of help agriculturally.
I remember talking with you about a trip you had in North Africa where you went out, the guy took you out into an area and up into mountains I thought it was really interesting. Could you talk a little bit about that excursion?
I'm not sure. I mean, we did some crazy excursions in Morocco, but maybe the phase of Marrakesh is waving with me. But we had gone up into the mountains, the Atlas Mountains, and we got to look at some of the old, the French were there, obviously, before and after World War II. So they planted a lot of pine trees and all over the place. And so we got to go up into that, and then parts of that area, maybe this is the neat story, but we got to the Star Wars, where they were filming a lot of the Star Wars places, like Tatooine and all these crazy places were all filmed in Morocco in a lot of these mountain forested sites that we had been to. So if that's not the cool story I told you, remind me.
That's a good story, though. That's a good story. That's a good story. So, let's switch directions a little bit. So what brought you to CUF and to Unitarian
Great story.
Universalist, and what do you do here? What's your involvement at CUF?
Well, my wife and I, we went to, we kind of like help some friends plan a wedding at State College at the Unitarian Fellowship there, and just absolutely fell in love with the sanctuary. It was situated like right along Mount Nittany, really beautiful setting. Wonderful Unitarian people, and wow, I didn't know it, but you know, I was born and raised a Catholic, and through most of my years, and just once we found out about the 7 principles and what Unitarianism was, we're Unitarians, just didn't know it. So when we moved here with the job in '99, we found out about the Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship at our old building, and I think we joined probably a year after, around 2000, 2001, on and off through the kids. Been in RE and taken them on walks and camp outs with a lot of people in the room right here through the years. And then as you stick around, Gene, they put you in the leadership roles, and so you kind of have to wear a couple different hats around here. So in the last couple of years, I've been this Green Team chairperson.
Can you talk a little bit about that? What is a Green Team, and what does that involve?
Well, a Green Team, there's probably a formal definition, but a Green Team to me is a group of like-minded individuals who really, we all came together to try and think about the sustainability of the building, our sustainability as part of our principles of like the interdependent web of resistance that we are all a part, trying to reduce our carbon footprint here at CUF. And just lots of, we had all these sounding boards through the years about building a prairie and having a walkway through the prairie. And I don't know, 2 years ago when we got started, I think we had Miss Christina Cross from Faith in Place here. She came and kind of just introduced us to what Faith in Place was and different ways she could help us. And within a year, I think we were put in touch with the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation and applied, and Wade Alva, current Faith in Place coordinator in the southern region, really went to bat for us. And so we got a great grant to basically turn our lawn into a prairie, a pollinator prairie. So that's what we started.
Okay, so maybe we can go out and see the prairie, perhaps.
Yeah.
We could take a tour of the prairie at this point. By the magic of technology, we'll take a little tour of the prairie. So Charles, we're here in the midst of our the beginnings of our pollinator prairie area here at CUF.
What are we looking at here?
Well, you know, we got this thing started last, February. We planted it after killing all the grass and everything. Planted it, we had a nice snowfall, and then the seed set very nicely. And so, from all reports that we're getting from the people that have helped me identify things, we've got about 24 prairie species here, 3 or 4 wet prairie species. So, you know, we got a little bit dry habitat, wet habitat as well. And I'm still learning how to identify all 24 of those species, but I do know a couple right in this area. We've got quite a bit, hope I'm not stepping on it, but we got prairie dock right in here. We've got this really cool thing called rattlesnake master. It's got these really neat thorns along the side. Black-eyed Susans, obedient plant, Monarda, or is that wild bergamot or bee balm?
Yeah, bee balm. I think that's what that. Yeah, right over there.
And then all around the backside here, the asters and goldenrod have gone really well.
How about in this direction? What do we got over
off
here?
in that direction, we have our pink coneflower, wild senna, Indian plantain, wild angelica. I'm not sure that's a real species. Black-eyed Susans, brown-eyed Susans, smartweed, purple topgrass. That's the native grass that we really want to keep and enhance in here. But we don't have everything.
Well, it's kind of cool to see these tall, I'm not sure what they are, but they're going to seed.
They're seeding right now.
And you can watch them in the wind here this morning. The seed heads drifting off on the wind, which is great. I mean, that's what you want to see happening.
That's what we want to see, right.
And I see bee balm over there with seed heads on it. A lot of them have their seed heads up now late here in the summer, early fall.
So you know one thing I found out about prairies, I never knew this, but there's some early flowering and then mid flowering, and then there's some that are late flowering, well into the fall. And I never knew that about prairies, but they have to provide insects, you know, and the pollinators the whole season through the whole season. Yeah, I didn't realize that we would be seeing things kind of pop up at different times of the year.
So what's going to go on next here?
Well, we do have one problem species in here. I think it's called Japanese mint, and it's crazy. It's all over the grass and the lawn, so we have to control it. And the first thing we're going to do this year is we're going to have a burn late winter, early spring. We do a prescribed burn here, and that will help the grasses, and that will help everything that's here is meant to burn. The rosettes will burn, and it will just you know, invigorate the flush for next year. So that's the first thing we'll do, and then we have a few things we have to implant or seed into it. So the big ones are ironweed, big blue stem, couple of new grasses, side oats, grama, New England aster, golden Alexander, blue sage. That's a real early bloomer, very early in the spring. So we're going to try and get maybe 8 to 10 more species added through the next growing season.
And how big an area is this?
This is 1 area, or 1 acre exactly. We had to have at least 1 acre of lawn turned into prairie to get the grant.
And this was all lawn?
This was all, I don't know if you remember, but the lawn here would look pretty scrappy through time. It was real spotty. We didn't have very good topsoil to begin with. So yeah, the $1,000 grant was to get rid of your lawn and build a prairie.
Yeah, I mean, big area that just got cut. Every week. It got cut. Now we're not doing that.
I think the fellowship would even be happy to know that we're saving some money on our lawn bill.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of natural landscaping, right? You don't have to run a mower over it constantly. You let it grow.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, should we get back to our interview?
Sure. That would be great.
Right on.
The magic of technology. I will say, and Charles and I talked about this, our cameraman who did a great job, but he's not a plant expert. And so some of the plants that showed up, if you recognize them, you'd say, that's not an aster, that's a zinnia. So, but he did a great job. It happens to be Charles' son, Jakob. So
Jacob.
he did a great job with it. So we really appreciate it. So perhaps talk a little bit more about plans. So we're going to do a burn at some point.
Yeah, we'll do a burn this winter sometime. Probably about the same time we are going to plant seed in a bunch of stuff from Robert Rothrock. He's provided us with some more seed to fill in some things. And then we have signs to develop, to put up. And the education part is working with the parish school next door and getting a teacher involved to like maybe bring a class out. Probably not the day of the prescribed burn, but maybe the day before or after to kind of talk about prescribed fire activities and how it's going to work on the soil and stuff like
that. Yeah, could you talk about that a little bit? I mean, how do you do burn? Do you just go out and light a match and throw it down and let her burn? Or
we generally, it's a science, you know. Well, we consider the weather, of course, consider the fuel moisture, consider the winds and the direction of the winds and relative humidity. So the way we have it set up out there, most of our winds are coming out of the southwest, and we're going to burn from a point. It's called a heel, and we'll just burn out and just slowly fan out and take the whole area. But this should go pretty quickly. It's only an acre. So we'll do that, I don't know, probably a Sunday afternoon or something. It's really nice out.
And that burning won't kill the plants that we want to keep?
No, all the prairie plants have evolved with fire readily. Every 2 to 3 years, most native prairies were thought to have burned every 3 to 5 years to maintain the prairie plants and to keep the woody trees from encroaching on the prairie. And actually, there are already 2 trees that have found refuge in our prairie that we need to burn out right now. I just found them recently. Fine. So it's time to start burning.
And the deer bed
the deer
down in
bed
there.
in it every night. Yeah.
They like that tall grass.
Indeed.
It's comfy and sheltering for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. And I know even since, we didn't do that tour tonight, by the way. You might have.
Different shirts.
It was a different shirts, although mine is still green. It's just long sleeve instead of short sleeve. But even since we did that, we've planted some more plants out there. Joe Pye weed, milkweed
from the Sassons.
Little blue stem, some more asters. So it should look pretty good. How long do you think it will be?
I don't know. Everybody I know comes through there and drops seed in there. It's going to be like this veritable like Kia pet at some point, I'm sure. But our prairie people say by year 3, everything is very verdant and all the seed heads are up by then. So I'm surprised we saw as much as we did this year because I was expecting it to look pretty dismal. Apparently it isn't.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you walk out there, there's lots of stuff. Yeah. So,
and we should say, this is a great time to plug. We had a wonderful award from Faith and
Place. Yes, absolutely.
Green Team Award. So thank you, Wade, for putting us in for that. Prominently displayed out in our scholarship.
Well,
award.
Thanks for your leadership of the Green Team. Yeah. Before we open things up to questions, I wanted to ask you one more question from me, and that is, so you're a teacher, right? And a big part of being a teacher is seeing your students go out into the real world and do things. So it would be interesting, I think, to hear a little bit about what your students do, where they end up, what kinds of things do students coming out of your program get involved in?
I mean, thanks to the efforts of all the faculty and staff in our department, we have great students who get out and work the whole gamut of natural resources because they have a forestry degree. So they may work with wildlife habitat, they may work as a conservation police officer, they may work as a fire manager or a fuels planner, or an aviation specialist in heliTAC or something like that. I love to open my kids' eyes, our kids' eyes to like just all the facets of forestry and the things that they can do. And it's not just slinging paint on trees and running chainsaws and stuff like that. It's really creative. It's an art and a science. It's really wonderful. And, you know, your human passions and your spirituality can come to play in what you do. I tell students, when you're cutting trees, you get to act like God. You get to choose what lives and dies and becomes the next forest. And, you know, you have to make those decisions for the future. So they go everywhere. They go work for agencies. They work for consulting foresters. They work for the government in all 50 states and a couple different foreign countries, actually. So we've got a pretty good alumni group that get out there and get jobs. So very pleased with that.
I'll actually tell a story about one of your graduates. That's probably 10 years ago. We're out in Glacier National Park, and my wife Laura and her mom we've gone off to go fishing, my two sons and I, and Laura and her mom are going to go on a ranger-led tour. Okay, this is out in Montana, and so Laura starts to talk with this young ranger who's going to do the tour, and she asks him, so how did he end up there? Well, he was an SIU Forestry grad. He had just graduated recently. And as it turned out, while he was in school at SIU, he worked for Barbara Lazar, helping her take care of her yard. So for anybody who doesn't know, Barbara Lazar was a longtime member of the fellowship and a real wonderful citizen of Carbondale. But so that we met one of your grads by chance out in Glacier. Well, let's open things up to some questions now from anybody who's here, and I think we can take questions on Zoom as well. We'll repeat any questions. We'll repeat them so people on Zoom can know what the question is. Anybody here? Roy.
What kind of maintenance is going to be required for the pollinator acreage for the next, say, 5 years?
Good question.
So, I don't know if you heard that, but the question is, what sort of maintenance is our prairie pollinator garden going to require over the next 5 years?
I would hope that we would be able to burn it, like actually burn it with fire, probably 3 times in the next 5 years, maybe every other year. We are already talking about developing a walking path, a very sinuous walking path up to, like, there's a little general height up there that we want to put a sitting area with a bench and like a contemplative area. We've talked about a couple different ideas for sculptures at that little location. So other than like mowing the path and implanting a few species every now and then, I really don't see that much. And the burning is pretty cheap. There's Bic lighter and a little bit of help from Mother Nature. But no, I mean, I'm hoping to be able to have my students come and volunteer and put my time in to do the burn. But it'll literally, an acre of prairie will burn in about 14.5 seconds. So it'll go over very quickly. So not a lot of maintenance, honestly.
Mary?
Well, one of the things we've talked about in the past is how to get rid of the grass. And one of the things we've talked about is out here on the east side of the building is putting in some kind of tall grasses or something. Well, what kinds of things other than tall grasses could we possibly think about? And how long do we have to wait how long does the prairie have to get going before we tackle other areas outside? Because, I mean, we really want this not to have much grass at all. We want to try to do what we can to turn it into a natural prairie.
I understand. Go ahead and answer.
No, the question basically is, we've got other property here. How many acres do we have here? We've got 4 acres. And so our goal is to reduce the amount that we mow each week. And so Mary's question is, how long before we can tackle another project, right? on the east side of the building, and what might that involve?
Well, I think of our 4 acres, maybe an acre and a half or so is building and macadam, so that's already gone from the list. My big concern with the big tall grasses is their fire. I mean, they are a fire hazard, and being like our setbacks here along the side of the building are not that great, so we don't have much room to put anything. Plus, we have a drainage ditch right here out this back side. So I don't know what we can put along there other than trees, honestly, because there's nothing that's going to screen us from our next door neighbor and the dog park or anything like that. Because if we put grass in there and we burn it, we're burning it right against the long end of our wooden building, and I don't really like that.
Well, I didn't know what kind of other options we might have so that it's not grass out there. Because it's,
we originally had plans to put prairie in along the front edge of the berm just to screen us from the road. We could still do that. I mean, and that would be a screen from the road, but not necessarily from our side. Go for it. Jess.
Oh, Mary asked my question. I wanted to know how much more of our lawn we could get rid of. So you answered it. Thanks.
Great.
I think one thing we could do that comes to mind is the 2 retention ponds that we have. We could turn them into cattails and into
Yeah,
like
I've wondered
wetlands.
about that.
That would be easy, and then all we got to do is flood them every other year or something.
And I've wondered about whether we could create over on that side of the building a small, like, forest area.
Sure.
Instead of a prairie area,
Yeah,
a forest area with a path through it.
I like that down there around the little wet spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that too.
Yeah. Other questions, either from our Zoom audience? Got another one on Zoom?
Okay, so what would I want the religious education kids to learn from this experiment? Well, I think they should understand a little bit on prairie ecology. They live in the prairie state, you know, and I grew up in Pennsylvania. I knew it was the Keystone State. And why? So the kids should know a little bit about the prairie ecology here and what we as the Green Team, you know, why we're making this prairie an important part of our kind of service or outreach to the local community. I think that would be useful. I don't know all the species out there, so I wouldn't ask them to know them either.
Right. But we talk about it as a pollinator garden.
You said you could.
And maybe talk a little bit about pollinators. I mean, the role.
You have to ask me about pollinators. Again, I'm learning. So this whole process about putting a prairie in, I've burned lots of prairie, but I've never built a prairie. So I'm learning as we go here, quite honestly, like the species and what animals we would bring in. I think Dr. Mullison would probably be a better person to ask about the
You'll be our next special guest.
The fauna that we're bringing into our garden, I have no idea about other than white-tailed deer and humans, but every time I go out there, I see new stuff, and I just don't know enough of my lepidoptera to really know. Sorry.
Got a question. Hello?
Hey, how are you, Dr. Ruffner?
Oh,
I was just wondering if the fellowship was getting any kind of like certification for like from an organization like National Wildlife Federation, or if that's been like considered, just so that way people know that it's there.
I see.
Well, We have not applied for any of that certification. However, when we put our signs up, we're required to put the funding agency up. We did get some help from the national, or from NRCS, so the Natural Resources Conservation Service helped us write a plan for implementing the prairie. So I guess we would get some kind of recognition from them, or give recognition to them for that help. So no, I don't think we're getting any kind of certification from any agency other than the NRCS just kind of signing off on our plan. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Other questions?
Get your,
Well, I had a question. Oh,
Tom Robinson wants to ask.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
thank
Hey,
you.
you got other people.
You're on.
I was curious if this is going to require some kind of a city approval. Is this going to have to go through a planning commission or some other approval to do a prairie?
Tom?
Okay.
Tom, this is a heck of a time to ask about permitting right now, isn't it?
It's always better
Yes,
to,
I'm just trying to joke because I haven't heard from Tom in a long time, and he's a builder, so he would think about stuff like
it's
this.
the theory of ask for
But we did
forgiveness rather than permission, right?
No, Jerry Malumbi, our very able grounds manager and facilities manager, reached out to the city of Carbondale and asked the planners what exactly we would need as far as setbacks and everything. So we have actually followed those designs to the letter, and I don't remember what they are off the top of my head, but we did consult with the officials. Thank you, Tom, keeping us straight.
Great.
I think
Kathy?
Kathy had a question.
Going to work in general forestry background, so the climate change, how is that impacting the
Okay, Kathy was asking regarding climate change, how I felt it was affecting the Shawnee, or maybe how the Shawnee is reaching out. I think climate change right now across like natural resource agencies, we are all singing, this adaptive management. We're not sure what's happening. We're not sure how much rainfall we're going to get. We know we're going to get a lot more rainfall, and the duration of those rainfalls is expanding, or burn seasons for us, as far as the burn window season, seems to be expanding well into the fall and starting even earlier in the spring, where we used to have much more of a dormant season, and that doesn't seem to happen as much anymore. So I think what I hope the Shawnee National Forest is doing, and I know what we're doing as a faculty, is the catchword now is trying to teach people how to build resilient ecosystems that can take a hit from a derecho or from some kind of natural disturbance and be resilient to that perturbation and rebound back from that perturbation. So you'll see in a lot of sustainability magazines, a lot of sustainability discussion groups, they're talking about building resilient ecosystems that can take these types of impacts. So I hope that answers your question. Dr.
Don?
I understand that you and some of your students and what have you help. This is like our Georgia National Wildlife Refuge control birds and songs. And I guess what I'm wondering is, how do we decide when an area is in need of what are some of the benefits that
Great question. We may be working in grasslands for pollinator habitat, and when you start to see encroachment of woody trees, oaks and red cedar and honey locust and black locust with thorns kind of coming into your prairie, it's time to burn to try and reduce the number of those trees encroaching into your prairie. So you may burn more frequently. in a prairie, obviously. In oak woodland around here, you may be burning maybe once every decade or twice a decade to try and remove some of the unwanted understory species through succession. You know, you get a lot of advanced species that seed into the understory, so you want to try and check that a little bit. Also, we burn in the understory to maintain our oak woodlands are basically remnants of old savannas, and they have a lot of prairie vegetation in the understories of our forests. So when we just do simple thinnings and remove some of the overstory and allow light to the forest floor, those seed or sun-loving species just pop. I mean, they're not, we don't plant them, they're just in the seed bank. So bringing back that ground layer flora and diversity is very important for ground nesting birds and other species. So as far as deciding when, things get on a schedule, but it's kind of the art, I guess, of the science of when a land manager goes out and sees the response that the land is having to the most recent burn, or maybe you didn't burn hot enough last time because of poor weather conditions. You may want to burn more frequently or hotter next time to have some top kill. So lots of, I mean, there is a myriad of reasons, as you know, for burning. Nesting habitat, winter ground nesting habitat for birds. I can just go on and on, but I hope that answers a bit of your question, Don.
One visual piece of that is, I'm wondering if this is typical, but I can see in some areas where very woods, see that you get rid of some of the brushes that are eating, and the next year there's all kinds of wildflowers.
Right.
Is that typical?
Right. Well, a lot of the brush that's being removed is this advanced regeneration. There's not been a lot of disturbance in our forests since about the 1960s or 70s. So what happens in forests is succession, and vegetation changes through time. So a lot of things seed in, and if they're not removed by fire, removed by grazing or some other perturbation, they just continue to grow. So now we're going in and doing a lot of thinning and removing that brush and burning it and allowing those sun-loving plants in the understory to just take advantage of the open sunlight conditions, really. That's the most important thing. Forestry is all about managing light. Simple as that. Forrest Gump says.
Couple more questions. Oh, we got one online? Okay.
Hi, I was wondering when you mentioned what to do on our rest of our property besides trees, what about some native shrubs? There are a lot of really beautiful native shrubs that would reduce the amount of mowing you'd have to do as they would spread out.
Yeah, I love your idea, Benita, and I want to plant farkleberry all over the property. It's a native vaccinium, and it grows in these beautiful, like little bonsai forests all over the uplands of the Shawnee Hills. I think you're right. We need a little farkleberry patch outside there. It's a real species. Look it up.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
How about Jody?
I just had a question about, say you're a landowner with several acres, what are the benefits or reasons why you would, or is there any forecast of how much percentage should go to prairie, nature prairie, and how much should go to forest? Is there a better way to go about managing or being the land?
Call your local forester. No. Yeah, I think she just did. Well, I mean, the first question you ask a landowner is like, what are your management objectives? What do you want out of your property? Do you want, if you have 10 acres, do you want 10 acres of prairie, or Do you want, you know, a mix? So generally, I think most landowners want like a mix of species. They want a little woodland, perhaps, to ride their ATVs around in with their grandchildren, and perhaps cut a few logs out, you know, when the kids go to college every 30 years or whatever. Or, and then they have some old planted row crop areas that they can turn into like conservation reserve program and plant some prairie. Oh, it's okay. The people online did not hear the question.
Okay.
Is that what it was?
Okay. I apologize. That's my fault. So a couple more questions here. We'll say. Right here, there was a question, then we'll go to Bill. So.
Well, I was wondering how your neighbors are responding, especially when you learn what they see is a lot of oil gas stuff. This was done several years ago. The same thing. And there's tremendous community concept.
Yeah.
And it took a couple of years before it started. So wondering what you experienced and how patient you need to be as far as the project.
Okay, so let's repeat the question this time, which is basically how will we interact with our neighbors, particularly when it comes time to burning, to be good neighbors?
I would say extreme patience. Southern Illinoisans are conservative folk. And I think telling, you know, like the government was telling the people to get out of the woods and stop burning the woods for 50 years. And now in the 1990s and 2000s, they're coming out and telling us they're going to start burning the woods. You know, it's like, what's happening here? We learned through a lot of mistakes when we first started putting fire on the ground about, you know, some concerned neighbors, trying to educate them about what we're doing, why, and it's basically a big public perception. And it's taken me 20 years to try and turn the tide in Southern Illinois to get the public perception of fire to become positive. And we're still probably about 48% there. Yeah, you can upset your neighbors, upset some communities, but we've burned here in Carbondale for Green Earth numerous times. You go around, you tell all the neighbors what's about to happen this Saturday. You bring them out to a public meeting and tell them the public benefits of prescribed burning and why and what our safety precautions are, you know, winning hearts and minds. So good question, and it's not done yet.
Bill?
A couple of years ago, I and many people were at a public hearing around the Pond Creek Mine, which is in Franklin County, and the mine was requesting authorization to use the creek for mine waste drainage. And a couple of the people who spoke most, powerfully about that were SIU Forestry students. And I believe they may have been officers of like the Forestry Student Association or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I've heard you speaking about many service projects where your students are involved. I wonder if you can talk at all about how the program at SIU, and you personally, to whatever extent that applies, how that encourages students to participate in environmental advocacy.
Okay, so the question is basically what sorts of things occur in the as part of your forestry program to educate students about and to encourage them to be involved in environmental advocacy activities.
Great question. We have several courses with that name, environmental advocacy, but from a social dimension side of forestry and natural resources, they go through a whole slew of courses where they're looking at forest policy, intro to recreation, forest recreation, problem solving, forest management, you know, as far as forest planning and dealing with like the National Forest Plan and how to move the Shawnee forward. A real recent thing as far as advocacy is the Cade Purcell's The Shawnee Showdown movie was recently shown on campus, and several of us faculty went, several students went to the first showing, and we reached out to her, and she's now not giving us our own special presentation, but she's invited us to the next showing on the 18th of November. And we've now asked our students to go see that movie and get educated on how to deal with the public and the public perception about logging and forestry and the need for forestry or the need for non-forestry, and stay out of the woods. And it's all about environmental advocacy for sure. So I feel like we give them a healthy dose. We don't tell them what to think or tell them that this is a movie that, you know, it's all the evils of forestry. It's like, go see it, open your eyes. I mean, I was in forestry school in the late 90s during like the spotted owl and the Clinton debates and stuff like that with Gore. So we were encouraged at Penn State to go to those public meetings and talk about it. So yeah, I think it's part of the curriculum.
Any other questions from our Zoom audience? In here.
Cat will? Oh, right on, Pat York. I knew she was out there watching. Hats off to Pat York and all the Forest Service folks out there, and my friends from TNC and IDNR that are watching. So thanks for tuning in, folks.
One more question here. And
What's your favorite tree?
the question is, what is Charles' favorite tree? Other than the farkleberry, which is really a bush, right?
That's just a shrub. Wow.
There's so many of them.
I have a lot of favorite trees, but I don't know. I guess it would have to be Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree.
Well done, sir. Well done. Well, we've been at this for almost 55 minutes, running up close to an hour. And so I want to thank you, Charles, for doing this with us. I think it came off just fine.
Right on.
And I want to thank everyone here and everyone in Zoom land. I would suggest you look for future off-the-cuff conversations because they're in the planning stages, and there'll be more opportunities to engage like this. So thank you very much, Charles.
You're welcome. That's my phone. It's probably my mom. What are you doing? Yeah, right. Thank you, guys. That was fun.